All right. I'm just, ooh. Uh, I'm playing with things I've never played with before. Okay. I was admitting people in the waiting room. Not sure why. But thank you everyone for joining us today. This panel is called Minds Matter, and it's all about writing mental health in YA literature. So if that's what you were looking for, you are in the right place. And if it's not, well, you should stay anyway, because all three of the authors we have for you today are fabulous. And I'm going to do a short introduction about all three of them, let them talk a little, and then we'll do some questions. And feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We have somebody who is monitoring that. So we can ask these authors if you have any questions that come up. All right, first, Ellen Hopkins lives in Nevada, and she has dogs named Sansa and Win. And she, I think, used to own a video store and also used to buy and sell classic cars. Alyssa Sheinmel apparently loves semicolons. The first chapter book she ever read was The One in the Middle is the Green Kangaroo by Judy Blume. And her top 5 tips to be a better writer are read, 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 and you guessed it, read. And Joan F. Smith is a writer, an associate dean at a college, and a dance instructor. To celebrate her book release, she had a TikTok dance party. And like so many of us, she turned to baking during the pandemic, and those pains du chocolat looked fabulous, I have to say. And the Great British Bake Off. All right, so I don't know which one of you would like to go first, but go ahead, and if you wanted to introduce yourself at all.
Go, Alyssa.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Sheinmel. My most recent book is called The Castle School for Troubled Girls. But most of my books deal with mental health and in various different ways. And I think, I keep coming back to those topics because I think we write about things that are important to us, and these are things that are important to me, and something about which there are always more stories to tell, always more to learn, always more to try to talk about and to continue talking about and do a better job talking about than I did last time. And so this is just topics that I keep coming back to.
Everybody, I'm Joan. My debut just came out like 3 weeks ago. So it's been a lot, but this is the Half Orphan's Handbook, and it deals very directly with mental health. It's a teenager grieving the loss of her dad to suicide, and it's inspired by my own life events as well. Something that I think about mental health, it keeps coming up in my work because it comes up so much in my life. I always say that it's the longest relationship you'll ever have is with yourself. So I think it's really worth it to work on yourself your whole life. So yeah. And Ellen, how about you?
Well, I've been around a day or two, I guess. So, and several of my books do also deal with mental health. And it's, first of all, it's something we deal with in my family, kids, other family members. So, and all different facets of that, I guess. So you'll find, depression, suicide, thoughts of suicide, whatever, but also like my middle grade, which you maybe see over there, my debut middle grade, so upper middle grade as well. Most of you know me, you know that I write contemporary issue-driven verse novels, mostly YA, but now I've moved into middle grade as well, and they're upper middle grade. So Closer to Nowhere is my latest book. It deals with post-traumatic stress disorder caused from early childhood trauma. So it's and inspired by one of the children that has come into my life. So a lot of my books are inspired by people close to me, including kids that are downstairs playing right now. So, and I think it's important that we open up those conversations, open up those doors and windows and let people look inside so they get some understanding of either themselves or people that are not themselves.
All right, thank you. So the first question that we have is, describe your motivation to create characters with life difficulties. And I know a couple of you have already talked about that, but if there's anything you'd like to add.
Well, for me, it's like I've got this example that's right in front of me, and I don't want to write that child exactly. So I create the character that looks like him in some ways, but whose story is different. Because first of all, I want to give the real people a little bit of breathing room here, you know, and not make. I'm not writing memoir. I'm not writing autobiography. I'm not writing biography. I'm writing fiction. So, but to take the emotion and to when you're living with those emotions and the jumble of them and the up and down with them, and to put them inside a character and help that character make sense of those emotions himself, I think it helps first me understand what we're going through here. Second, for readers to be able to understand that as well through fictional characters who read very real.
I tend to think of conflict and problems and that kind of thing when it comes to storytelling to be something that I personally relate to more as like a viewer. I tend to need to know if a movie or a book is going to be strictly lighthearted, because I find I need to be in a very specific mood to want to read that. And when I'm there, I really enjoy it. But otherwise, I really like to see how people deal with problems or don't. I like problems that have solutions and problems that have more than one solution. And I find that, you know, we learn so much from mistakes and we grow so much as people when we make them. And I like seeing how other people do that too.
I mean, I think kind of the initial spark for all of my books has been like, how is this character going to address the problem that they have, whether it's the problem of loss, of, you know, a accident, and whatever it is, it's how are they going to handle that problem. And then the other thing, you know, once that spark comes to me, I tend to do a lot of research, and that definitely helps shape how I tell the story, and you know, it adds more motivation. Like when I was researching my book, What Kind of Girl, which was about a teen in an abusive relationship, the more research, and I already started writing the book and already knew that was what I was going to write, but the more research I did, the more I wanted to tell that story, and so that added to my motivation to tell the story and you know, and really talk about what I was talking about in that book.
So what do you kind of consider the biggest challenge about writing and portraying mental illness effectively and so that readers can connect in your stories?
I treasure sensitivity readers, first of all, because everybody's experiences are so different, and something I don't take offense to, somebody else might. And I think it's really important, especially if you're writing for children, to be able to portray things in a way that is sensitive. One of my critique partners is actually a psychologist, so that is very helpful as well. Yeah, that's me.
I completely agree with Joan. Sensitivity readers, I'm very grateful for my sensitivity readers. My most recent book, The Catholic School, dealt with grief, and so one of my readers is actually somebody who does work as a grief counselor, and her advice was indispensable. And I think Joan also is exactly right that, you know, when you're writing about mental illness, it's such an individualized experience when you're writing about mental health. And even when I've written about my own experiences, I've had people reach out to me and say that wasn't what my experience with my experiences with eating disorders, and then people come and reach out to me and say that's not what my eating disorder was, and I'm only telling like one person's story, and I always have to remind myself of that, that I'm only telling one person's story, but I have to do it as sensitively and as carefully as possible.
I think it's really important to avoid stereotypes. You know, people get an idea of like what trauma looks like, and because it is different for everybody, that to stereotype is really dangerous. I am fortunate in that I've been around a while, and I have many readers that come and share their stories with me, and they're willing to allow those to become inspiration. And there are things that affect all of us, and sometimes mental health it's a kind of a watery space. You know, I've got dogs. But you can be, solid and then not, and you can't always tell, from looking at somebody. And so I think it's important to really be able to show the nuance of what mental health is, because it's all a matter of degree, right? And so it's the nuance, it's the making the stories real, and you do that by finding the humanness in those stories. And that's that's important to any contemporary that you're writing, for sure. But when you're dealing with something that affects all of us in some way, it's important that we get it right, for sure.
So the next question is, can you write about your character or characters and then step away? Or are you surrounded by your character's behaviors until the book is finished?
I don't step away very successfully. Because they talk to me, which I don't, but they do. So I feel like when I'm immersed in a book project, they're like sitting right here next to me, and they're sitting right there next to me. And I'm always thinking about what I want to do next with the book. So I don't put it away very successfully. Sometimes I wish I could, like it's Friday night, let's go out and have some fun. It's like, well, wait a minute, I got to finish this chapter first.
Joan, you want to go ahead?
Oh, go ahead, Alyssa.
Sometimes I'm able, it depends on the book, it depends on the project, it depends on the day. Some days I can step away and some days I can't. It really varies from character to character and literally from day to day. Within the same project, there will be times when, I wake up in the middle of the night with a bunch of ideas for it and have to roll over and make a bunch of notes. And then there'll be a period within that project where I need to take a break from it for a few days. So I think it depends on what stage in the project I'm in and just what mood I'm in, in addition to what mood my characters are in.
I think that I'm actually good at stepping away. I've been changing my mind during this conversation, but I tend to leave them where they are unless I'm trying to puzzle something out, in which case I will very deliberately think about it. I'll think about it while I go for a run, in the shower, while I'm conversing with my kindergartner. I think that I need to separate from them, because if I don't, then I don't figure out what the problems in the story are or how to write it better or what have you. If I don't step away, I don't get that cognitive distance from it.
I completely agree with Joan. I think I'm the same way. When I'm puzzling something out, that's when it kind of stays with me. And when I'm not, I can step away. And I spoke about this on an earlier panel about being a plotter versus a pantser. I am an outliner. I do tend to plot. So I think that also gives me some freedom to step away.
Me too.
Not me. That's probably why I can't step away, because it's just always I'm always puzzling it out because I have no idea where the book's going. And I do get woken up, but usually it's real early in the morning, so I can't go back to sleep. Lady, get up, you know what you forgot.
So Ellen kind of mentioned this earlier about that she has fans or people who have shared their stories and have allowed her to share them with others. But have you ever gotten any fan mail from readers who had the same difficulties as your characters?
Yes, I have. That reader mail means so much to me. I can't even begin to tell you, but yes.
Yeah, exactly the same. It's so valuable, and it just is so meaningful. I save all of those pieces of mail forever.
And it's a lot of them they'll come to you and go, your book saved my life. And they mean that. They sincerely do. Whether or not that meant that they were that close to suicide or not, I don't think that's what they mean. It means that they were so lost that finding a path out of that space that they're in through a book that they read, that changed their lives for them and gave them the hope that they could do it as well. It's kids today there's so much stress and pressure, especially I think on American kids who are they're supposed to be focused on college when they start kindergarten. And, you know, we put all this pressure on our kids to succeed. We don't let them have fun anymore, you know? And so I think that pressure hurts them in some ways, even when they, you know, are stepping up and handling it. Like, I don't know how kids, like Caleb here, he's 12 and he gets straight A's and he pitches little league no-hit innings. And I'm like, dude, how do you do all that stuff with all this stuff going on in your life? And it's important to him, you know, but I'm like, well, go have some fun now, you know, go out and throw rocks, not at the windows though, but, you know, go do something kid-like, would you?
Yeah. So there was a question that came up in chat. How can someone manage their own mental health when becoming a writer while writing about it?
I mean, I can't speak to that kind of on a global level. I can tell you for me, the first time I wrote about a book that dealt with eating disorders, I was really anxious about it. It was in a period in my life when my eating disorder was behind me. And I thought, if I go deep into this character, am I going to kind of open up that, am I going to open up some memories and get back into some bad thought patterns? Because by getting into that character's head, was I going to get into those thought patterns again myself? And I was really anxious about it. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to write the book. And I mean, I think this is where what Joan was saying earlier about allowing yourself some distance from your characters can be really valuable. Like for me, that was very helpful. That like I put that book down when I needed to put that book down. And I also and you know, honestly, it also showed me how far I came because I didn't fall back into those patterns and thought patterns. So it also, you know, helped me realize, okay, I can write about this and I can talk about this, and it's become something I'm very passionate about writing about and talking about because it doesn't have the same effect on me.
Well, writing for me is about figuring stuff out anyway, you know, again, because I don't know. So instead of pantsers and plotters, I like architects. You are an architect and I am a gardener. I plant seeds and I just let them sprout and see what happens. But in that, you know, when you're gardening, you have to prune stuff. You have to you know, train things to grow the way you want them to and stuff. And I think stories like that for me, that it actually helps me put my own thoughts into some kind of a private order, that it helps me kind of work my way through whatever bad spot I might be in at the time as well. Because none of us, you know, live these ideal, I know there's probably people that think we just sit in our desks and, you know, a story comes in and then every day is just a perfect day. And it's not like that at all. Because, you know, as a writer, we're writers, but we're also parents, we're also grandparents, we also have our dogs, whatever our problems are we're married, you know, it's like, dealing with our husbands or whatever. It's like, okay. But I do think writing for me puts things in order and it helps me with that.
I think it's really vital to remember that you're a person outside of being a writer too. I saw advice a long time ago about making sure that you have a life outside of the publishing industry. Make sure you have friends who don't even read. Make sure that you have hobbies that have nothing to do with writing or storytelling or anything like that. And if you don't, then kind of explore to see maybe knitting is your thing, whatever it might be. I think it is really helpful for me to be able to connect with my kids via baking or something. I'm a terrible baker, absolutely abysmal. And yet it's time away from writing. It's time with my kids. It's time that is really valuable. And making sure that you have those things outside of writing, I think helps save the sanity a little bit. And speaking of the sanity, you know, I think it's always evolving. Therapy is really important for me. And when I didn't have a therapist, I had a lot of self-help books. So it's a constant process for me.
Oh, sorry, lost my place. So let's talk a little bit more about the characters in your books. Do you have characters that are empathetic with the main characters? And if so, why are those characters important?
Everybody, I mean, when you're writing books for young people, for sure. I mean, your characters have friends, right? And I mean, when you're a teenager, specifically, friends are like everything, right? It's like you go to your friends generally for advice, or you go to your friends for support or whatever, more often usually than you go to your parents, because parents are set up as like the authority figure and your friends are more like not. So yeah, I think it's really important that your characters have as not even not just empathetic friends, but also ones that'll question them. They'll, put them, what are you doing? Because that's what you should be doing when you have somebody who's using, or you have a friend who's like thinking about hurting themselves, or or whatever they're doing, or has a eating disorder. They need somebody in their lives. Your characters need somebody that's going to call them out and say, wait, you need to ask for help, just like in real life, right?
I mean, I think my book, What Kind of Girl, that's kind of the heart of what that story is that there are two main characters, both of whom are struggling with mental health issues, and both of whom are, who are ostensibly best friends, but who both have been keeping those things secret from each other. And over the course of the novel, many other things happen. One of the things that happens is that they do share with each other their struggle and realize that they, even though they are dealing with different issues, that they have in common that they care about together and want to help the other. And so I think, for them, that is what allows them to ask for help and accept help, is the fact that they have this friend who reaches out to them and reveals her struggle with the other. So yeah, I think an empathetic friend character, like Ellen was saying, like when you're a teenager, your friends are your number one go-to before anything else.
Yeah, in my debut, the premise is that my main character goes to a grief camp. And what was really special about that for me was that everybody there has gone through some form of grief. So there's like a really crappy club that you join when you lose somebody that close to you. And so they absolutely understand that with one another. And there are a few adults in the book who kind of act in a mentor kind of way that definitely empathy was the driving force behind that. And then on the flip side of that, I just finished a draft of an adult manuscript, and not having empathy for one of the struggles that a character is going through is one of the main sources of conflict in the book. So,
and in Impulse, which is about 3 kids whose lives connect in the psych hospital after separate attempted suicides, it's actually the friendship that forms between them. They didn't know each other, but the commonality of their experience and the differences in their experiences drew them together and kept them kind of going when it was difficult to be in that situation. And so then the question becomes, is that enough to get them out? And I'm not going to give away if it's enough for all of them or not, but you guys have probably read the book anyway. And that book, I will tell you, out of all my books, I have 14 YAs, and they've all done very well and developed a big long readership. But I think out of all my books, that one overall is the one that has helped the most kids, at least as far as the letters and stuff that I've gotten. So it's a favorite for many. And I think it's because even if you're not all the way close to like suicide or whatever, it's this, there's a fragility about being a teenager, and you can empathize with people that are there, that are thinking about that, because it crosses everybody's mind. Well, maybe it'd just be easier on everybody if I was gone or not, So I think there's a commonality in that idea that, am I good, should I stay or should I not?
So there was another question in the chat. Hold on, I gotta scroll up. Oop. Have you ever had negative responses, or do you worry about writing an issue or about an illness or issue perfectly, specifically like negative responses to your books from people who have those issues or know somebody who has had the issues that you're writing about?
can't say I have.
I mean, I think, when you're writing about such sensitive topics, I I don't know if I would say like I've had negative responses, but I've certainly had responses where people have had a lot of questions for me. And you know, I think just I know I write about very sensitive topics, and I try to do it as respectfully and carefully as I possibly can. I try to, like Ellen was saying, avoid stereotypes. Like Joan was saying, I rely on sensitivity readers, and I do a lot of research, and I also just like love my characters and care about my characters. So I'm writing about them with a great deal of affection and care and respect, but I know that their experience might not be exactly the same as someone's experience in their life, and I know that as that's just the world I'm navigating when I deal with this sensitive topic.
Right, and everybody, each individual, their reaction to whatever's going on in their head's going to be a little different, right? Because it belongs to them. So I don't know that I've gotten any really negative feedback as far as that. As far as other stuff I have, all my books have been challenged. Let's just put it that way. But and that's more like content stuff. It's not really not writing the issue correctly, I don't think. And in fact, I think it's more the other way, that much more mail coming in, like, thank you for understanding me, for like being my voice when I can't. And I think that's how a lot of readers feel, that like they don't want to say anything, but they appreciate that somebody wants to speak for them. And a lot of times I get parent mail too, and usually that's pretty positive as well. That, your books meant a lot to my daughter, pulled her out of the space or whatever. So thank you for the books. And that might have even been a parent several times that didn't want her to read that book until after.
Yeah, sometimes the mail from the parents is just incredibly moving. Like I just heard from somebody the other day about a topic that's addressed in a couple of my books that their daughter was struggling with, and it just like it means so much, because like I'm saying, I get notes from people saying thank you for telling the story, but it means so much when you hear from someone who loves that person. That like, and not just always parents. Sometimes I hear from friends or siblings. It's really just like that it gave them some insight into understanding what their loved one was going through.
Yeah, I included an author's note in my debut because the experience is so individual. So I differentiated a little bit between what I experienced and what my character did, and also just included the fact that like any of the things that are in here could be taken completely differently in any other person's shoes, basically. That's why I do think the sensitivity readers are so important to vet these things, to make sure that as much as possible how you're portraying it is authentic.
Okay. I have one more question, but if other people have questions, please drop them in the chat. Somebody will pass them along to me so that we can hear more from these amazing authors. So the last question I have for right now is, explain how you put yourself in your characters' lives.
Well, I'm the master. You will do what I say. It's the only time I really get to do that. I think I can, but not really. I think, that's what we do though. That's it's funny because people go, I could never write a book, but everybody wants to write a book, but I could never write a book. It's just a matter of, it's understanding people, it's caring about people, it's wanting to care about people, it's trying to, again, open windows for people to look into this other space. And we're the window openers, right? We're the ones that have to like slide the glass back and let them look inside. It's interesting. I did a book, Identical, which is about childhood sexual abuse, and at the hands of a father, actually. And I had a reader thank me one time. She came to me and she goes, I want to thank you for not closing the door, because you actually go into the room instead of just being in the hallway with the door shut. She goes, because if you close the door, people will say nothing really happened behind the door. And so for her to just have somebody, yes, this does happen. Yes, that's, the experience was a little different, obviously, but yes, I understand and I believe you. I believe you, because that, in that experience is often something that other people don't want to believe happens, right? So it's just believing your characters, believing in people, and then believing in your characters. And then it's easy to step in.
I think sometimes, I mean, I do a lot of research on my books, but I also think sometimes my characters come into my life, not necessarily me opening my, like, I think sometimes I just get their voice stuck in my head. Like I said earlier on a panel, it's like a song I can't get out of my head except it's the character's voice. So that they come to me, like, not to sound too like woo about it, but like sometimes I feel like they're coming into my life and it's just for me to tell their story.
There's this, there's the authorial voice, right? So I write everything. I've written picture books, I've written adult. My debut is the first book that I ever actually finished writing. And if you had taken the first draft that I wrote and published it, it would read like a really bad memoir with like very little plot. And I think that what I've learned throughout the process is some of the things that I've experienced, I will put in there. Some of the things that I have not experienced, I will attempt to put in there. And then I do like to take things and completely twist them around. So like if you have a neighbor who chops down trees, I might make a neighbor who's a gardener. So I like to flip things in real life people who I know. And it seems to me that like everything I'm writing just kind of feels like me anyway. So I guess that's how I'm in there, because it's my words.
So sorry, my phone's going off next to me. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, as I'm sure many of you are aware. And so I was just wondering if you had any, I guess, words of wisdom or, tips and tricks that maybe help you or help someone you love that help you deal with, mental illness or whatever you're going through.
I think it's important to I mean, I guess I'm thinking about being a parent. So I think it's important as a parent to notice changes in your kids. So Crank, which is my first novel, which is inspired by my daughter's story of addiction, right? There was stuff that was happening that I didn't want to look at. You know what I mean? It's like, and I'm like, oh, it can't be her. This is my daughter. This is this kid who's, straight A kid. She's like, it can't be what I think it is. It took, if I would have recognized it a little bit sooner, I think I could have changed the outcome of that. I could have changed the path, because when she turned 18, she was gone, right? So I couldn't help anymore. And if I would have really looked harder, listened to what she was saying, because there's nuance, there's undercurrent in the things your kids are saying. So if you can, and I guess it probably is the same with anybody, not just your kids, but if anybody that's in your life, changes in them, especially big changes, like from straight A to like not straight A to like, D's or going out the window at night or whatever, those are big, and little changes can signify something bigger. So just be really aware. If you can, keep the channels of communication open as much as you can. And it's hard because, like I said, parents tend to be set up as the enemy or whatever, the antagonist in the story. And it's hard to always promise them that you're not going to judge, because as a parent, your job is to keep them safe, but it's also to try to correct the situation, and you can't always be that person.
I think for me, it is definitely finding those outlets that help. And also, I think you don't need to wait for there to be a problem to be working on yourself and to be like really mindful of your mental health. Because, you know, mental health, we hear it all the time, but it's on a spectrum, right? So you could be at the top of the spectrum, but then if you don't watch, you could start to go down. You can slide back and forth all the time. It's never too early, in my opinion, to get a therapist. My daughter is 6 years old. She calls hers her feelings doctor. So right now she's already like working up to knowing that it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to talk about feelings. My 3-year-old knows that his sister talks to a feelings doctor. And I think if we take away like the taboo aspect of it, there's so many more opportunities to save ourselves before we get low.
I just completely agree with everything Joan said. I think, you know, if we can take away that taboo and realize that asking for help is actually a sign of strength and not weakness, and that it's never too early or your problems are never too small to ask for help. We tend to belittle our own problems. Just be, you know, it's never too small to ask for help. And I think also finding some outlets that do give you a rest, like Joan was talking earlier about baking. I love to cook, and like I find that when I am cooking, especially if I'm working on a new recipe, I know it sounds just a silly thing, but while I am learning a new recipe, I literally can't think about anything else, or else I'm going to mess up the recipe. So it takes my attention, it takes my focus. I also feel very good about myself when I'm doing it because I'm doing something productive that has nothing to do with my job and has nothing to do with cleaning my house or researching my next book. It just is, I'm feeding myself and feeding my family and learning something new. And I think, you know, outlets like that, like for me, in addition, like practicing yoga, meditating, like finding things that give you a little bit of a step back from yourself can be really helpful. And that's all self-care, that's taking care of yourself and carving out time for self-care and prioritizing that because it is important. And I think that's another thing we tend to poo-poo, like, oh, you know, it's like it's indulgent to take care of yourself.
Cooking's the only place where I appreciate outlines, you know, like recipes, because you can still deviate, you know what I mean? But you want the basic stuff right, you know, you got to get the right baking powder in there or it's going to go flat. So cooking is funny. It's like, because of this lockdown this last year, I think a lot of us ended up cooking and like, where I can't find flour. Where am I going to find flour? Yay, we created problems for us.
Finding creative solutions to the things you couldn't find.
Right?
My husband took up cooking, so I feel like I won some kind of gift with this.
Awesome. Well, mine actually, he used to cook for me, and since I was here all the time instead of traveling, it's like he stopped. I'm like, dude, really?
Okay, so it looks like there is another question in the chat, and I know you kind of talked about this, but if there's anything you'd like to elaborate, the question is, does writing help you with your own mental health?
Yeah, we'll go back to because for me, it's about order. It's about excising stuff, and also about allowing things to escape, like my brain, because writers' brains are weird. They don't usually turn off. You know, like when we talk about being woken up in the middle of the night by our characters and stuff, because your brain just keeps working. You keep working on plot problems and stuff all the time. So when I'm actually writing it, like kind of like lets all that stuff, it puts it where it belongs instead of keeping it stuck here. So I think that it's an outlet. Writing is an outlet. And I actually suggest to teens a lot that they write every day, even if it's just a little bit in a journal or whatever, to appreciate what's happening in their lives. Later, they'll go back and appreciate, or not, what's going on in their life now. But it also is an outlet. It's a way of allowing a little whatever to escape into a safe space, which is on the page or on your computer screen or wherever you're writing it.
Yeah, I think having a creative outlet is good for your mental health. So whether it's writing or any, like I just, whether it's writing or painting or whatever outlet you have, like I think having an outlet is good for all of our mental health.
I've got a few neurodivergencies that really, really work well with writing. So those are definitely, my experience with those are absolutely more endurable, I think, when I am able to create them. And even if they don't end up in my books, like writing out any of the big emotions or the big feelings, I think is very cathartic for me. Other times I get too close to it too, though, I guess I'll say. So there's that.
All right, so we do have just about 5 minutes left. I don't know if there were any other questions that anybody had, but now is the time. And if we don't have any other questions, we talked a lot about mental health and writing and characters today. So if there is anything else that you guys would like to share as authors, as people who talk a lot about mental health.
What do you guys have coming up? Can I ask Joan and Alyssa, like, what do you guys have coming up?
Sure. So, well, I just debuted like 3 weeks ago, so that was a whole thing. But my next book is coming out in winter 2023. It is around the pitch is they both die at the end meets The Butterfly Effect, the movie. So it's a girl who knows everything and she really messes up the life of somebody else. So
Ooh.
I don't actually know exactly when my next book is coming out, so I don't want to mention it because I don't know the timing. But my most recent book, The Castle School for Troubled Girls, just came out a couple months ago and deals with mental health issues and issues of grief and loss, and it's out there in the world. And it's one I started kind of playing around with this idea years ago, and it just didn't work. Like it was loosely inspired by the 12 Dancing Princesses fairy tale, and when I started writing it, I think in like 2012 or 2013, I wanted it to have this sort of fantastical element, and that just didn't work, and I had to set it aside. And it's something I came back to like a year or two ago, and it took shape in a way that it hadn't, 5 or 6 years ago. And so, I'm just so excited it's out in the world. It feels like it's a book I've been working on for a very long time.
Nice. I've got another upper middle grade coming out in September. It's called What About Will? And it's about the younger brother who's doing everything right while his older brother is having big giant meltdowns, and so all his good stuff is taking a backseat to the focus being on the brother going in the wrong direction. But it's really a book about a love between brothers, and it's definitely inspired by these two weirdo brothers that I got.
And somebody did ask in the chat, who is your favorite character? And they didn't say if it had to be yours or not, so we won't limit you.
Well, that's a broad question.
It is a very broad question.
I'll go to my favorite character right now is, like, it always has to be the book that I'm working on. So I'm just doing first pass. So my favorite character right now is actually Trace, who's the main character in What About Will? Will's the older brother, who's just this really great kid and my favorite thing about him is he gets to have a female friend. Like, she's like the new kid on the little league team, and all the boys are like, "Ugh," and she's like amazing, and he's like, oh my God, girls can be amazing too. Yay.
Hey, girls can be amazing.
Well, I agree with Ellen that my favorite character is usually the one I'm like in the midst of writing, because that has to be my favorite character, that has to be my favorite book. But I think I can't choose from my past books. Hannah from A Danger Herself and Others was one of my favorite characters to write because her voice is so wry, and she kind of says and does things that I would never say and do. So that was just a pleasure to write. Even though she's a very complicated character, it was a lot of fun to be in her head.
Mine change all the time, I think. From my debut, two of the protagonist's friends, Deese and Winnie, are two of my favorites. They're just really good people. And then right now, I just started revisions on my upcoming book. So December is the girl's name, and I'm very in her head right now. So I guess I'll call her my favorite.
All right. Well, that's basically all the time we have today. So thank you so much to our authors for joining us and just giving us a little glimpse into your world. And thank you, everyone who attended today. This is the last of the official panels, but I hear that there is something pretty special in the platform, so you should go check it out. And remember that you can watch this segment again, as well as view so many other author panels that happened throughout today on this platform or possibly other places. I think there was talk of maybe putting them other places after we're not able to use this. So make sure you stay tuned to Rochester Teen Book Festival to find out where you can find more of these author visits. So, all right. Thanks everyone so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so
Bye,
much.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.